Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Do you recognize that chilling rhyme? It emerged in the wake of one of America's most enigmatic and notorious murder trials, capturing the public's imagination and horror in the late 19th century. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, in the quaint city of Fall River, Massachusetts, a gruesome scene unfolded within the walls of the Borden family's 1845 Greek Revival-style home. Andrew Borden, a local prominent businessman, was found lifeless on the living room sofa, his head brutally bludgeoned. Upstairs, his wife, Abby Borden, met a similar fate, savagely struck down and left where she fell. At the time of the murders, only 2 other individuals were present in the house: 32-year-old Lizzie Borden, Andrew's daughter and Abby's stepdaughter, and Bridget Sullivan, the family's Irish live-in servant, who was 26. Despite Lizzie being the prime suspect, the trial concluded without a conviction, leaving the chilling question open: what transpired in the Borden household that fateful day? Did Lizzie Borden ingeniously orchestrate the perfect crime, or was she unjustly tangled in a web of suspicion? Welcome to Nightmare Houses. Fall River, Massachusetts, located in Bristol County near the Rhode Island border, experienced a significant industrial boom during the mid to late 1800s. The city earned the nickname Spindle City as it became a major textile manufacturing center. Its industry and population multiplied, fueled by the power provided by the Queschican River, which ran through the city, turning the massive textile mills. Andrew Jackson Borden was born in Fall River on September 13, 1822, into the prominent Borden family. Though not wealthy, his family was respected in the community. Andrew, one of 9 surviving children, was the son of a proud Yankee, laborer, and Protestant. He started his career as a carpenter before managing his Uncle Thomas Borden's property. By 1845, Andrew had formed a successful business partnership with William M. Almy, dealing in real estate, furniture, and cabinet making. His hard work and sharp business acumen made him a wealthy man, and he soon owned multiple properties throughout Bristol County. Despite his prominent family background, Andrew was fiercely proud of being a self-made man. Andrew's fortunes flourished as Fall River transformed into a bustling industrial hub. During this time, a local investor built a 2-story duplex at 66 2nd Street on land owned by Andrew's uncle, Lodwick Borden. Completed in 1845 by Charles Trafton, the duplex was designed to accommodate mill workers and was considered akin to a tenement. On Christmas Day of 1845, 23-year-old Andrew Borden married Sarah Anthony Morse of Somerset, Massachusetts. The couple began their life together on Ferry Street, where Andrew had grown up. However, the Borden family was not without its scandals. In May of 1848, Andrew's aunt, Elizabeth Eliza Hathaway Darling Borden, committed an unthinkable act. Eliza was a local woman born in 1811. After her first husband and oldest son died in 1840, she married Lodwick Borden in 1842 and had 3 more children. But in May 1848, in a horrific episode, Eliza threw her 3 children with Lodwick into a cistern at their home at 68 2nd Street. While her daughter Maria survived, the younger children perished, and Eliza then took her own life in a tragic act of desperation. This grim event cast a shadow over the Borden family, with doctors determining that Eliza suffered from melancholia and possibly insanity. Rumors suggested Eliza's wound was so severe she was nearly decapitated, implying she may not have died by her hand. Despite the tragedy, Andrew and his family carried on. He and Sarah soon began their own family, welcoming 3 daughters. Only 2 would live to adulthood: Emma Lenore Borden, born on March 1st, 1851, Alice Esther Borden, born on May 3rd, 1856, who tragically passed away on March 10th, 1858, and Lizzie Andrew Borden, born on July 19th, 1860. The Borden family continued to live on Ferry Street, where Andrew's success allowed them to employ employ a live-in maid. Though they appeared prosperous and happy, tragedy struck again when Sarah Borden died in 1863 from uterine congestion and spinal disease at the age of 39, leaving Andrew to raise 12-year-old Emma and 2-year-old Lizzie alone. An already religious man, Andrew may have delved deeper into his faith during this time. While attending the Central Congregational Church, Andrew Borden met 35-year-old Abby Dufree Gray, considered a spinster by the standards of the time. Abby, the daughter of a local blacksmith, lived with her parents until her mother died in 1860. By 1864, after her mother's death and her father's remarriage to Jane Baker, Abby likely saw marriage to Andrew Borden as an opportunity to step up the social ladder and escape the shifting dynamics of her family's new structure, which included a stepmother close to her age and a younger half-sister. Andrew and Abby were married on June 6, 1865, and initially continued living on Ferry Street. Emma, now 14, and Lizzie, 4, were never entirely fond of their stepmother, maintaining a polite but distant relationship. As Andrew's business flourished, he purchased the modest duplex at 66 2nd Street from Charles Trafton in April 1872 and renovated it into a single-family home. Initially built in the Greek Revival style, the Borden house is 2 stories with an attic and basement and features a gabled roof and simple decorative elements. The facade is orderly and balanced, with evenly spaced windows and an off-center front door framed by flat pilasters. The gable end roof, which creates a triangular pediment above the facade, further emphasizes this dwelling, a direct nod to the architecture of ancient Greek temples. At the corners of the house, simple paneled pilasters mimic the appearance of classical columns, adding vertical emphasis and a sense of grandeur to the structure. The roofline is accentuated with pronounced yet plain cornices, reinforcing the building's temple-like appearance. The windows are double-hung with unadorned sashes, maintaining the clean, straightforward aesthetic of the Greek Revival style. The shutters, while functional, also contribute to the symmetrical, proportionate look of the facade. When Andrew Borden purchased it, the house underwent modifications that added a layer of decorative richness to an otherwise austere design. These changes included ornate moldings around the windows and door, introducing a touch of Victorian elegance. The house's original light-colored exterior, typical of Greek Revival architecture, was drab or fawn with a dark green contrasting trim. The front entrance, accessible by a small set of stairs, is a focal point emphasized by decorative moldings that give it an inviting grand appearance. A small fence at the front of the property was likely constructed of wood and painted white. Its design included an evenly spaced vertical picket topped with a flat horizontal rail, creating a clean and orderly boundary around the property. During his renovation, Andrew left an original fireplace in the guest bedroom, placing a bed in front of it, a decision reflecting his frugality that was often misinterpreted as miserly. As the Borden sisters grew older, they yearned for a lifestyle that matched their father's wealth, feeling constrained by their living situation. By 1875, the address of this home changed again to 92 2nd Street, reflecting the growing population of Fall River at this time. By 1885, rumors began circulating in Fall River that Lizzie had taken up shoplifting. When confronted by shop owners, Andrew paid for the items, likely to avoid scandal. In 1887, a significant family conflict arose when Abby persuaded Andrew to purchase a home on 4th Street for her half-sister Bertie and her husband, who were struggling financially. This decision angered Lizzie and Emma, who felt slighted by their father's generosity toward their stepmother's family. To appease his daughters, Andrew transferred ownership of the Ferry Street home, once owned by their grandfather, to Lizzie and Emma. However, this gesture did little to placate them, as the property was located in a less desirable area, far from the affluent lifestyle they desired. In 1889, a new Irish maid, Bridget Sullivan, replaced a former maid in the Borden household. Like many young Irish women, Bridget immigrated to America seeking better opportunities after the Great Famine and ongoing economic hardships in Ireland. However, upon arrival, she faced significant challenges, including widespread anti-Irish and anti-Catholic sentiment that often relegated Irish immigrants to low-paying, menial jobs. Despite Andrew Borden's apparent disdain for Irish Catholics, Bridget found work with the Borden family family for low pay but seemingly steady work. She performed most of the housework, while Abby, Emma, and Lizzie took on lighter chores, reflecting the social hierarchy and discrimination of the era. As the 1890s progressed, tensions within the Borden household escalated. Andrew Borden's frugality and strict financial control created a growing rift between him and his daughters, particularly Lizzie. Despite the family's wealth, the Borden home on 2nd Street lacked modern amenities like electricity and indoor plumbing on the upper floors, which embarrassed Lizzie and Emma, who longed for a lifestyle befitting of their social standing. Their dissatisfaction was further compounded by a strained relationship with their stepmother, Abby, whom they called Mrs. Borden, following the property dispute years earlier. Financial considerations also played a significant role in the mounting tension. Under the inheritance laws of the time, Abby stood to inherit a substantial portion of Andrew's estate if she outlived him, potentially leaving Lizzie and Emma with significantly less than they expected. This financial motive, coupled with Lizzie's growing resentment toward her stepmother, added to the strain within the family. In the summer of 1890, Lizzie embarked on a life-changing 19-week tour of Europe, funded by her father. This experience exposed her to the luxuries of aristocratic society, fueling her dissatisfaction with her life in Fall River. Upon returning from her European tour, Lizzie, now accustomed to the grandeur of aristocratic life, was dissatisfied with her living arrangements in the modest Borden home. She requested that Emma, who occupied the larger of the 2 bedrooms, switch rooms so Lizzie could have more space to accommodate the many souvenirs she had brought back. But despite this change, Lizzie remained unhappy. The switch did little to alleviate her feelings of confinement in the austere and outdated home, which starkly contrasted with the opulence she experienced abroad. With its lack of modern amenities, in association with the frugality that Lizzie resented, the Borden house continued to be a source of frustration and discontent. The theft of money and jewelry from Andrew and Abby's bedroom in June 1891 only deepened the mistrust within the household. Andrew quietly suspected Lizzie, giving her rumored history of shoplifting. In response, Andrew began locking every door in the house, leaving the key on the parlor mantel as if tempting the thief. In May of 1892, the Bordens hired a painter to repaint the home's exterior, with Lizzie supervising the project. That same month, Lizzie hired a dressmaker to design a dress out of Bedford cord. By July, the sisters decided they no longer wanted the responsibility of managing the unglamorous Ferry Street property their father had given them years earlier. Andrew bought back the property from his daughters for $5,000. However, this relief from their investment did little to alleviate his daughters' frustration. In late July and early August 1892, tensions within the household reached new heights. Emma and Lizzie left home and went to New Bedford, possibly following a disagreement with their parents. While Emma continued to Fairhaven, Connecticut, Lizzie stayed in nearby New Bedford. Instead of joining friends on a fishing trip, she returned to Fall River for a charity meeting, but stayed at a boarding house for several days, only returning home on August 1st, 1892. On August 2nd, both Andrew and Abby complained of stomach ailments and vomiting, which had started overnight. Abby visited the family doctor and neighbor Dr. Bowen, who attributed the illness to the hot weather and possibly spoiled food. Fall River was amid a heat wave, and the couple had been eating mutton stew left on the stove for several days. While Dr. Bowen suspected spoiled food, Abby believed it was poison. On August 3rd, John Morse, age 69, Andrew Borden's former brother-in-law and the uncle of Emma and Lizzie, arrived at the Borden house. He had come from New Bedford to look at a pair of oxen and visit family. John Morse and Andrew Borden remained involved in business dealings despite John's sister's death, and he maintained a close relationship with his nieces. That evening, Lizzie visited her friend Alice Russell, who lived on 3rd Street. During the visit, Lizzie confided that she believed her father's milk had been poisoned and feared for his life, suspecting he had an enemy. Lizzie only stayed at her friend's house for about an hour before returning home. She did not see or speak to her uncle John Morse, who was staying in the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, which also connected to Lizzie's room. There were also reports that a woman matching Lizzie's description was seen in a Fall River drugstore, unsuccessfully trying to buy poison. However, no one could ever verify this allegation. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, the Borden household began, like any other, with Andrew, Abby, and Bridget all doing their usual routines. Around 6 a.m., house guest John Morse awoke and entered the sitting room while waiting for breakfast. At the same time, Bridget Sullivan rose to start breakfast and housework despite not feeling well that morning. By 6:30 a.m., Abby Borden had also woken up and gone downstairs to discuss the day's chores with Bridget. After breakfast, Abby asked Bridget to wash all the first-floor windows inside and out in addition to her usual daily tasks. Around this time, Andrew Borden came downstairs with his chamber pot, which he disposed of outside. Upon re-entering the house, he brought in a basket of pears from the trees outside, washed his hands, and joined John and Abby at the dining room table for breakfast. This meal included leftover mutton broth, Johnny cakes, fruit, cookies, and coffee. After eating around 8 a.m., John and Andrew briefly talked in the sitting room while Abby and Bridget began their chores. Bridget, still unwell, ran outside to vomit in the backyard. By 8:45 a.m., John Morse left the house through the back screen door. Andrew followed him out, and they briefly conversed in the yard before Andrew invited John back up for lunch at noon, a conversation that Bridget reportedly overheard. Andrew then re-entered the house, locked the rear door, and used the back stairway to go upstairs to his bedroom. Around 9 a.m., Lizzie came downstairs for her breakfast of cookies and coffee. After a brief exchange, Andrew left the house through the side door to collect rent and other tasks on Thursday. Abby, meanwhile, continued her housework, heading upstairs to clean the guest room by 9:30 a.m. Bridget had gone outside to wash the first-floor windows, chatting with a maid from the neighboring Kelly house as she worked. She used water from the barn pump and didn't enter the house or see anyone inside during this time. Sometime between 9:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m., someone entered the second-floor guest room where Abby Borden was likely changing the sheets on the bed. The assailant struck her 19 times on the head and neck with a sharp, heavy object, likely a hatchet. The layout of the furniture, particularly the bed and dresser, created a tight and narrow space, leaving Abby with little chance to defend herself. This confined arrangement may have provided the assailant with leverage to deliver the blows quickly and efficiently, while simultaneously restricting Abby's ability to escape or fend off the attack. The attack was swift and brutal, with the initial strike likely rendering Abby unconscious immediately. The ferocity and the speed of the assault suggested it lasted only a few moments, leaving Abby fatally wounded almost immediately. The subsequent strikes caused her death within moments, with the assailant showing a clear intent to kill her quickly. Meanwhile, unaware of his wife's fate, Andrew Borden was on his usual business around town, getting a shave, meeting a prospective tenant, and picking up a small parcel. Around 10:30 a.m., Bridget finished washing the windows outside and returned to the house, locking the screen door behind her. Soon after, Andrew returned home, only to find the screen door locked. He attempted to use the side door, but then went to the front of the house and knocked. Bridget, hearing his knocks, went to the front door to let him in. She briefly struggled with the lock, letting out an audible expression of frustration, and heard a giggle from behind her, possibly from the top of the staircase where Lizzie was laughing at her struggle. Between 10:40 and 11:10 a.m., Lizzie spoke with Andrew in the dining room, informing him that Abby had received a message from a sick friend and had gone to visit her. Andrew then went upstairs to his room using the back staircase and quickly returned to the sitting room. It was a hot day, and Andrew still wasn't feeling well from the suspected spoiled food. He had also come home earlier than expected due to his illness. Lizzie helped Andrew settle down on the sofa in the sitting room for a nap. She then briefly spoke with Bridget in the kitchen about housework before Bridget went up to her third-floor bedroom for a nap herself, still not feeling well. Bridget later noted that she was in her room by 11 a.m. because she heard the clock from City Hall. Lizzie's exact whereabouts during this time remain unknown, as she gave conflicting reports about her location and activities. Sometime between 11 a.m. and 11:10 a.m., someone entered the sitting area, a centrally located room between the main entry, kitchen, front parlor, and dining room, and struck the napping Andrew Borden on the head with a heavy, sharp object, roughly 9 times on his face and head. At 11:10 a.m., Lizzie called for Bridget, yelling, "Come quick!" "Father's dead. Somebody killed him." Bridget immediately set out to find Dr. Bowen, who was not home then. She left a message with his wife and returned to the Borden house, only to be sent out again to fetch Lizzie's friend, Alice Russell. A neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, saw Lizzie at the side door and asked her what was wrong. Mrs. Churchill then asked some men to get a doctor and call the police. By this time, it was around 11:15 a.m. Having been located, Dr. Bowen arrived at the Borden home with his wife. While the women comforted Lizzie, Dr. Bowen examined Andrew Borden and declared him dead. Andrew Borden was 69. Mrs. Churchill fetched a sheet to cover his body, while Dr. Bowen telegraphed Emma, who was still in Fairhaven, informing her of her father's death. The chaos of the day had only just begun when Officer George Allen arrived at the Borden house at 11:25 a.m. Notably, this was the day of the Fall River Police Department's annual picnic, meaning that a significant portion of the police department, including many experienced officers, were absent in town. Officer Allen quickly checked the first floor and left for reinforcements, leaving another officer to stand guard at the side door. Meanwhile, Mrs. Churchill began to wonder where Abby Borden was. Lizzie asked Bridget and Mrs. Churchill to search for Mrs. Borden. The women climbed the front staircase and upon reaching the second-floor landing, saw Abby Borden's feet in the guest bedroom. They found Abby, who was 64 at the time of her death, and saw her condition. Lizzie had told her father that Abby had visited a sick friend, a lie she never explained, but it was clear Abby had never left the house that morning. Between 11:35 and 11:45 a.m., more police officers arrived. Dr. William Dolan, a medical examiner, examined the bodies of Andrew and Abby and determined that Abby had died first based on the temperature and coagulation of her blood. At about noon, John Morse returned to the Borden house. He was seen outside eating pears in the backyard before entering the house, seemingly unaware of the flurry of activity surrounding the home. The police began investigating and searching the house, basement, and barn. During this search, they collected various objects, including hatchets and axes. The bodies of Abby and Andrew were placed in the dining room to be studied, where their clothes and other blood-soaked items were tossed into the basement. A deputy went to Lizzie's second-floor bedroom to interview her. She had changed from wearing the blue dress she had been wearing earlier to a pink wrapper. During the interview, she seemed cold and emotionless, only stopping to correct the deputy that Abby was her stepmother, not her mother. The home was abuzz with activity for the rest of the day, and gossip spread quickly. By 7 p.m., Emma arrived home from Connecticut. Lizzie and Emma sat in the front parlor while police conducted more searches inside. At some point, an officer observed Dr. Bowen tearing pages from his notebook and burning them on the kitchen stove. By 9 p.m. that evening, officials assigned police to guard the house overnight. An officer observed both Lizzie and Alice Russell go to the basement to empty the wash pails, with Alice holding the lantern for Lizzie. A short time later, Lizzie appeared to return to the cellar alone for a few minutes before going to bed. That night, John Moore slept in the third-story, unfinished bedroom. Alice Russell also stayed the night, occupying Andrew and Abby's room, while Emma and Lizzie slept in their rooms. The bodies of Andrew and Abby remained on the first floor of the house. Bridget Sullivan collected her things, went to a neighbor's house, and never returned to the Borden house again. The following day, police searched the Borden house again, this time with more officers returning from their day off. John Moore stepped out of the house the following day, only to be pursued by an angry mob who suspected him of the murders. The police had to escort him home, and Morse was eventually ruled out as a suspect due to his airtight alibi of being away at the time the murders occurred. On August 6th, the bodies of Andrew and Abby Borden were removed from their home, and a memorial service was held. Shortly after, they were taken to nearby Oak Grove Cemetery. However, during this time, police conducted another search at the Borden house. Alice Russell showed the city marshal a suspicious club she found in Andrew and Abby's bedroom. The marshal later asked Lizzie for the dress she wore on the day of the murders, and she provided a blue blouse, blue skirt, and white undergarment. As the case garnered public attention, growing crowds gathered outside the house, curious and eager for answers. The mayor suggested the Bordens remain at home to avoid the press and the increasingly hostile mobs. While the investigators were in the home with the Bordens in the front parlor, Lizzie stood up, offered her wrist for arrest and asked if she was a suspect. The authorities, seemingly reluctant to accuse Lizzie due to her wealthy status, the fact she was a woman, or out of respect, initially hesitated to label her a suspect. However, on August 7th, Alice Russell saw Lizzie tearing up a dress in the kitchen and burning it on the stove. When questioned, Lizzie told Alice it was an old dress covered in paint, so she wanted to destroy it. Alice advised her that was unwise, but Lizzie continued anyway. Emma later claimed that this particular dress was the one Lizzie wore when she supervised the house painting job in May, and that it was just paint that stained the dress. On August 8th, the police searched the Borden house again, gathering more items for analysis. Police then interviewed the Borden sisters, as well as Alice Russell. During this interview, Alice mentioned seeing Lizzie burning the dress. By the next day, police were growing increasingly suspicious of Lizzie Borden being the prime suspect, and the official inquest into Abby and Andrew Borden's murders began. By August 11th, 1892, Lizzie was arrested and taken to the Taunton jail. By now, news of the gruesome crime and Lizzie's arrest had drawn nationwide attention. It became a media spectacle with much public interest in the case. On August 22nd and 23rd, Lizzie was arraigned and pleaded not guilty. However, she was to remain in jail until her trial. Between November 7th through the 21st, a grand jury convened, but no indictment was returned. Then, on December 1st, 1892, the grand jury reconvened, and Alice Russell's testimony about Lizzie's burned dress led to an indictment against Lizzie for 3 counts of murder, 1 for the murder of Andrew Borden, 1 for the murder of Abby Borden, and 1 count for both murders. While Lizzie awaited trial, the case continued to gain attention and speculation, thrusting her into the limelight. However, while Lizzie was still imprisoned, another violent axe murder occurred in Fall River on May 31st, 1893. It was the murder of 22-year-old Bertha Manchester, killed by an intruder. Police arrested a Portuguese laborer who had only been in the country a short time before committing the murder. Miss Manchester's murder cast some doubt on whether Lizzie was the actual killer of her parents. On June 5th, 1893, Lizzie's trial opened in New Bedford. Her legal team included Andrew Jennings, former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson, and attorney Melvin Adams. John Morse testified to his whereabouts and stated he saw bloodstains on the sitting room floor, contradicting the theory that the assailant avoided blood splatter. Bridget Sullivan testified to seeing Lizzie throughout the morning, noting nothing strange in her demeanor and seeing no blood or dirt on Lizzie's dress. However, she contradicted an officer's testimony about undisturbed dust in the barn. Alice Russell testified about Lizzie burning a dress on August 7th, 1892, describing it as a cheap cotton Bedford cord. Still, Lizzie expressed regret when Alice questioned the burning of the dress that day. The most damaging testimony for the state came from police officers whose inconsistent stories about finding a handleless hatchet undermined their credibility. The defense achieved key victories by excluding testimony of a pharmacist who claimed Lizzie tried to buy prussic acid and having Lizzie's inquest and testimony ruled inadmissible. Emma Borden testified about the habit of burning old dresses and contradicted police officers' claims about Lizzie's clothing. The doctors agreed that the attacks on Abby and Andrew would have caused significant blood splatter on the assailant, but no blood was ever found on Lizzie. The trial attracted widespread attention, with locals and tourists flocking to the courthouse to witness the proceedings. When the skulls of Andrew and Abby Borden were presented as evidence, Lizzie fainted, adding a dramatic moment to an already sensational trial. The defense capitalized on the absence of blood on Lizzie and the discovery of a hatchet on a neighboring roof, suggesting police negligence in their investigation. On June 20th, the jury deliberated for just 66 minutes before returning a verdict of not guilty. Lizzie collapsed in tears upon hearing the verdict, but the media caused irreparable damage to her reputation. Despite her acquittal, public opinion remained divided, with many convinced of Lizzie Borden's guilt and others believing she had been unjustly accused. After the trial, Lizzie and Emma Borden sought to leave behind the notoriety that had enveloped their lives. To start anew, they purchased a grand Victorian home in Fall River's prestigious Hill neighborhood, which they named Maplecroft. While the case and trial gained notoriety, so did a creepy little rhyme about the crime many believed Lizzie Borden had ultimately committed. By 1894, the rhyme about Lizzie Borden had been published nationwide, and school children sang it on playgrounds. Andrew Borden's former business associate, Charles C. Cook, who may have influenced Andrew's estate due to the lack of a will, helped Emma and Lizzie manage their father's investments and the family's extensive real estate holdings. After the murders, Cook became Lizzie and Emma's financial advisor and even assisted them in finding their new home at Maplecroft. The contrast between the Borden's family home at 92 2nd Street and at Maplecroft illustrate the stark differences in the lifestyle and aspirations that define Lizzie and Emma Borden's lives. 92 2nd Street was a modest Greek Revival-style house that reflected Andrew Borden's strict frugality. The home was functional rather than grand. It had plain exterior features and a somewhat cramped interior layout. It lacked modern amenities like indoor plumbing and electricity on the upper floors, which made it considered outdated even for that period. Situated in a busy, working-class neighborhood close to downtown Fall River, the house was tightly packed among similar structures, creating a sense of confinement in both space and lifestyle. For Lizzie and Emma, who were accustomed to a life of wealth, the lack of privacy, the practical design, and the home's location in a less prestigious part of town were sources of growing dissatisfaction. The sisters yearned for a lifestyle that better reflected their social standing. Still, their desires were constrained by their father's conservative approach to wealth and reluctance to indulge in luxuries. In contrast, Maplecroft fulfilled their long-held aspirations. This grand Victorian-style home, located in Fall River's affluent Hill neighborhood, was a clear departure from the simplicity of 92 2nd Street. Maplecroft was everything the 2nd Street home was not: expansive, ornate, and equipped with the modern amenities the Borden sisters had long desired. The house featured elaborate woodwork, stained glass windows, and spacious rooms that offered comfort and privacy, fitting the lifestyle of the wealthy elite. Its grand entrance and well-appointed interior spoke to the social status that Lizzie and Emma had always sought, and its location in a prestigious neighborhood provided the quiet and exclusivity they craved. However, while Maplecroft allowed the Borden sisters to live in the style they believed they deserved, it did not bring the social acceptance they might have hoped for. Lizzie, in particular, was ostracized by the Fall River community, living out her days in relative isolation despite her wealth, though she still participated and volunteered in charities and organizations. The contrast between the two homes underscores the tension between the sisters' social ambitions and the reality of their circumstances. However, this tension persisted even after they moved into their dream home. Bridget Sullivan, the Borden family maid, returned to Ireland after the trial, seemingly to escape the shadow of the Borden murders. Sometime around 1900, she moved back to the United States, settling in Anaconda, Montana, where she purchased a small farmstead and hired a cowboy. This unexpected turn of fortune for a poor Irish immigrant raised eyebrows, leading to speculation about whether she received a significant payout from the Borden sisters for her silence. Bridget Sullivan eventually married the man she hired, John Sullivan, but they never had children. The only time Bridget ever spoke of the case was when she confided to a close friend that she did Lizzie Borden a favor during her testimony at the trial, but she never elaborated. Bridget passed away quietly on March 25, 1948, at 79, taking any secret she may have held to her grave. Bridget's reticence reflects the societal pressures and precarious position she may have found herself in, a young, working-class Irish Catholic woman navigating a world dominated by wealth and power. In that era, women, particularly those of lower social status, had limited agency, and the idea that a wealthy woman like Lizzie could commit such a violent crime was inconceivable to many. This societal bias may have affected how the trial unfolded and how witnesses like Bridget were treated. The Borden sisters maintained ownership of 92 2nd Street, renting it out to tenants for over a decade. However, by 1905, a rift between the sisters, possibly related to Lizzie's social activities and the rumors surrounding her friendship with actress Nancy O'Neill, led to Emma moving out. She relocated to New Hampshire, reportedly not wanting to be found by her sister. In 1918, the sisters mutually agreed to sell the house at 92 2nd Street, likely arranged by Charles Cook, thus ending the Borden ownership. But the home's reputation preceded it and has done so ever since, and it's likely the reported hauntings within the home date back to this era. The property has changed hands multiple times and was primarily used for boarders and mill laborers in Fall River for the next few decades. Lizzie Borden eventually changed her first name to Lisbeth, but continued to live at Maplecroft with her pets and domestic staff. She was generally ostracized, and children occasionally stood outside of her home, chanting the infamous rhyme or throwing eggs at her house. Lisbeth continued to support her church financially, but found herself shunned by other parishioners. Lisbeth died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927, at the age of 66. 9 days later, Emma died of nephritis at 76. The sisters never reconciled. They are buried at the foot of Andrew and Abby Borden's grave in Fall River. Lisbeth and Emma's wills left most of their fortune to friends, cousins, and the Animal Rescue League, reflecting Lizzie's lifelong love for animals. Their longtime financial advisor, Charles Cook, outlived both sisters and passed away on October 19, 1934, at 77. Cook greatly benefited from the Borden sisters' wills, primarily from Lizzie, who left him with a large sum of cash, real estate, and a Lincoln sedan. Charles Cook ultimately navigated a delicate and opportunistic relationship with the Borden family, especially Lizzie and Emma, following the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden. A litigious man, Cook may have approached his business dealings with Andrew Borden and the Borden block with opportunism in mind. While he initially cooperated with the police investigation, his later actions and changing testimonies were driven by his financial interests. Ultimately, Cook profited significantly from his loyalty to the Borden sisters, though his legacy includes legal disputes and questions about his true motives and ethics. In 1996, 92 2nd Street, now renumbered to 230 2nd Street, was converted into a bed and breakfast, focusing primarily on the gruesome crime and the house's reputation as a paranormal hotspot. Now a bed and breakfast, the Borden house has evolved into one of America's most notorious haunted locations, with a dark reputation that mirrors its grim history. Visitors and paranormal investigators flock to the site, drawn by tales of eerie encounters and restless spirits that are said to inhabit the home. Among the most frequently encountered spirits are those of Abby and Andrew Borden, the victims of the infamous murder. Guests often report experiencing cold spots, hearing disembodied voices, and even seeing apparitions of children. The sitting area, where Andrew met his brutal end, and the basement are particularly known for their intense paranormal activities. But the house's hauntings are not limited to the Bordens. Eliza Borden, Andrew's aunt, who tragically ended her own life and that of her 2 young children in 1848, is also believed to linger in their house. Visitors have claimed to hear the sounds of children crying or playing and the unsettling presence of an unseen figure, particularly in areas associated with Eliza and her children. The spirits of Hannah Trafton and her infant son Charles Trafton Jr., who both died in the house during its early years, may also haunt the home. Over the years, the Borden house has gained a reputation for housing numerous other spirits, with some accounts suggesting that as many as 12 entities occupy the property. These spirits are not all thought to be directly connected to the Borden family or the home's tragic history. Instead, some believe the house acts as a paranormal portal, drawing wandering spirits to its dark energy. Adding to the haunted lore is the claim of a more sinister presence. This demonic entity is believed to be responsible for some of the more aggressive paranormal encounters. Visitors have reported being pushed, scratched, or overwhelmed by sudden, intense feelings of fear, particularly in the basement where Andrew Borden's bloodstains remain visible on the beams. This area is often associated with the house's most evil forces. The Borden house remains perpetually abuzz with activity, a unique convergence of the living and the dead. Guests, staff, and paranormal investigators contribute to the energy of the site, while the lingering spirits of its past continue to make their presence known. Whether these entities remain due to the violent events that took place there, or if the house itself has become a magnet for supernatural forces, the Borden house stands as a chilling testament to its dark legacy, forever a site of intrigue and fear. Lance Zal, owner of U.S. Ghost Adventures, a private company specializing in paranormal real estate, paid $2 million for the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast and Museum after purchasing it from the previous owners in 2021. Zal conducted extensive renovations to restore the property to its appearance during Lizzie Borden's era, with minor modern updates. The dress closet to the second floor, once used by Lizzie and Emma, has been converted into a 3/4 bathroom for guests' convenience. Guests can still stay in the very room where Abby Borden was found brutally slain, or in the attic bedroom once occupied by Bridget Sullivan, or any other bedroom in the house. Ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts can participate in scheduled house tours and other events. For more information, please visit www.lizzie-borden.com. Despite the passage of time, the Borden house remains a significant example of mid-19th century American residential architecture. Its Greek Revival origins and Victorian modifications reflect the evolution of styles during this period. However, it's the home's dark history that continues to draw visitors. With its unassuming exterior and hidden secrets, the Borden house has become as much a part of the legend as the murder themselves. Its walls have absorbed the echoes of that fateful day, and its rooms hold the lingering presence of the past. Did Lizzie Borden, within these very walls, orchestrate the perfect crime? Or does the house itself hold the answers, waiting to reveal its secrets to those who dare to look? Over time, misconceptions about the Borden home's layout and design emerged. Early floor plans, such as those published by Edwin Porter, contained inaccuracies that subsequent writers perpetuated. These include incorrect representations of closets, fireplace, and door swings, leading to a distorted understanding of the house's interior. Even officially sanctioned floor plans drawn by engineer Thomas Kieran contained errors, further implicating the historical record. Despite these inaccuracies, the Trafton Borden house remained significant. The home's enduring historical and architectural importance is a testament to its complex past, both as a home and the site of one of America's most infamous crimes, now recited by many thanks to the chilling rhyme that emerged. However, many mysteries, unknowns, and misconceptions surround this case, making it one of the most gruesome and intriguing in American history. Many believe Lizzie Borden was a killer who got away with murder. The case remains a haunting reminder of the mysteries of human nature, power of stories that blur the line between history and myth, truth and justice. What do you think? Did Lizzie Borden truly commit the brutal murders of her stepmother and father, or did she have assistance, perhaps from within the home, with the help of Bridget, John Morse, and Emma, or outside allies like Dr. Bowen and Charles Cook, and managed to escape justice? Did the wealth Andrew Borden accumulate shield his daughters from the consequences of his violent death, enabling Lizzie to quietly and conveniently gain the support of Fall River's political and business leaders, who may have seen his conservative stance as an obstacle to the city's progress? Lizzie Borden left behind her old life for her fashionable and modern dream home, only to spend the rest of her life ostracized and forever infamous. And would you dare stay at this haunted house? Thank you for listening to Nightmare Houses. For more information, including photos and references, please visit www.nightmarehouses.com. Until next time, goodbye.